David Rodriguez had been maintaining the elevators at Whitman Financial Tower for 8 years. At 45, his hands were steady and sure, whether he was calibrating delicate mechanisms or braiding his 10-year-old daughter Emma's hair before. School each morning, the late evening shift was usually quiet. Most executives had long gone home to their families, leaving David to perform the routine maintenance that kept the building's lifelines running smoothly. His Navy work uniform bore the honest stains of a man who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, and his graying beard framed a face that had learned patience through years of single parenthood. Tonight, he was checking the express elevator on the 32nd floor when he heard the familiar ding of arrival. The doors slid open, revealing a woman he'd seen before but never spoken to, Catherine Walsh, the company's chief executive officer. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and her charcoal gray business suit spoke of boardrooms and million-dollar decisions. "Excuse me," she said, stepping into the elevator. "I didn't realize maintenance was still working." David quickly gathered his tools. "Almost finished, ma'am. Just need to check the control panel on your way down." Catherine nodded, her arms crossed, clearly eager to end another long day. David knelt beside his toolbox, making final adjustments to the electrical connections. The elevator began its smooth descent. Then, between the 28th and 27th floors, everything stopped. The sudden silence was profound. No hum of machinery, no soft whoosh of movement. Just the quiet breathing of two strangers suspended between floors. David immediately pressed the emergency call button. Nothing. He tried his radio. Static. "The backup power should kick in," he said calmly, though his mind was already racing through possibilities. "Sometimes there's a delay with the newer systems." Catherine's composure began to crack. "How long do these things usually take?" "Hard to say. Could be minutes, could be longer." David opened his toolbox and pulled out a flashlight as the lights flickered uncertainly. "But I've got tools and I know these systems inside and out." As David began examining the control panel, Catherine sat down on the floor, her professional facade giving way to something more vulnerable. "I have to admit I'm not great with small spaces. Tell me about something that makes you happy," David said without looking up from his work. "Keeps the mind busy." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I used to paint, watercolors, haven't picked up a brush in probably 10 years. "What did you like to paint?" "Landscapes, mostly. There was this little lake near my grandmother's house in Vermont. I must have painted it 100 different ways." Her voice grew softer. "I always meant to go back there, but work just consumed everything." David tested a connection, then another. "My daughter Emma loves to draw. Says she's going to be an artist when she grows up, or a veterinarian, or maybe both." He smiled in the dim light. "Changes every week." "How old is she?" 10. "Going on 30 some days." David's voice carried the warm exhaustion of devoted single parenthood. "Lost her mom when she was 3, car accident. It's been just the two of us since then." Catherine's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." Emma barely remembers her, which is both a blessing and a heartbreak. David continued working, his movements methodical and sure. "But she's got this incredible spirit, sees possibility everywhere." The elevator suddenly shuddered, and a grinding sound echoed through the shaft. Catherine instinctively moved closer to David, fear flickering in her eyes. David's expression grew serious as he examined the readings on his diagnostic tool. The elevator wasn't just stuck. There was a critical failure in the braking system. The car was being held by emergency stops that weren't designed for long-term support. "Mrs. Walsh," he said quietly, "I need you to know something. The primary brake system has failed. We're being held by secondary stops, but they're not meant to carry this load indefinitely." Catherine's face went pale. "What does that mean?" "It means I need to manually reset the system from inside the shaft. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to get us down safely. You can't leave the elevator. What if I don't?" David met her eyes. Look, I've got a little girl who needs her dad to come home. But I also can't let anything happen to you. Your company employs 3,000 people. Your decisions affect families, mortgages, college funds. Catherine shook her head. You don't understand. Those people you're talking about, I haven't really seen them in years. I make decisions from spreadsheets and reports. I couldn't tell you the name of a single person who cleans my office. Maria Gonzalez, David said simply. 2 kids. Works double shifts to pay for her son's asthma medication. And James Thompson, been with the company 15 years, still sends money back to his folks in Mississippi. Catherine stared at him. How do you know that? Because I listen. When you work the late shift, you meet the real people who keep places, like this running. David opened the elevator's emergency hatch. Every person in this building has a story, a family, dreams that matter just as much as yours. He pulled himself up into the shaft, his flashlight illuminating the complex machinery. Above, Catherine could hear him working, the sound of tools against metal, his steady breathing as he navigated the dangerous space. David, she called up, are you okay? Still here. Just need to reset the primary brake controller. His voice echoed, down. Tell me more about that lake in Vermont. Catherine's voice shook as she spoke. It was perfectly still in the mornings, like glass. My grandmother would make coffee and we'd sit on her porch, watching the mist rise off the water. She always said that every sunrise was a gift we'd never see again. There was a loud clang, then another. David's breathing was labored now. Your grandmother sounds wise, he called down. She was. She also said that the measure of a person isn't what they achieve, but how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Catherine wiped tears from her eyes. I think I forgot that lesson. Somewhere along the way. It's never too late to remember, David said. Then, okay, I'm engaging the reset now. This might be a bit rough. The elevator lurched, then began a slow, controlled descent. David dropped back through the hatch, his uniform torn and dirty, a cut on his forehead bleeding slightly. When the doors finally opened in the lobby, Catherine turned to David before stepping out. What you did up there, you risked your life for me. David packed up his tools. I'd do it for anyone. That's what decent people do for each other. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. David, what's your last name? Rodriguez. David Rodriguez. David Rodriguez, she repeated, as if committing it to memory. How would you like to head our new facilities management department, with a salary that reflects what you're really worth to this company? David looked surprised. Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I like what I do. I like fixing things that are broken. Catherine smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Someone who knows how to fix things, starting with how we see each other. 6 months later, Whitman Financial became the first major corporation in the city to implement living wages for all employees, comprehensive health care for families, and a program recognizing the essential contributions of every worker. And Catherine Walsh, CEO, finally made that trip back to Vermont. She brought her watercolors, and on a perfectly still morning, she painted the lake while thinking about a maintenance worker who reminded her that the most important connections aren't made in boardrooms, but in moments when one human being chooses to protect another. Sometimes being stuck is exactly where we need to be to remember who we really are. The strongest foundations aren't built from steel and concrete, but from the courage to see each other clearly and the willingness to risk everything for what matters most.